What's going on, everyone? This is Cadman Cycling. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day. Today we're in Innsbruck. This is the 3R Innsbruck Ring flat race. 3 laps for a total of 26.4 kilometers or 16.4 miles. Actually just made the switch to the metric system within Zwift. I think this is my second race with it, so still kind of trying to do the conversions in my head. I'm in the US, so for whatever reason we use the imperial system, but I'll get used to it. I think it'll help me with a lot of the final sprints. So we're working with kilometers and meters today. So like I said, 26.4 of them, 3 laps around downtown Innsbruck. This is called the flat race. That's very true for the majority of the race, but we do have 3 sprints up the Legsnapper. Very steep climb, lasts maybe about a minute long, but definitely gets its name for a reason. So I'm in the C category. We have a good group today. We have 65 total riders, but that's across categories. We all started in a pretty close pen to each other, so I am kind of catching on to the tail of the Bs here right now, with maybe a couple other Cs, but the majority are Bs. I think there were only a few As in this race, but this is the front group, large group, but this is a decently long race. So I kind of really pushed it out of the gate to try to catch up with that group, and I kind of have a business decision to make here, and it's immediate. I mean, we're only a little over a minute into this race as we have a Tron bike swerving in and out of buildings. But quickly I have to make a pretty important race decision, and that's, do I continue to push with this front group? I'm kind of here dangling off the back, still in some draft, but I need to make this decision pretty soon. Do I continue pushing with this front group and just hang on as long as I can? This is a longer race for Innsbruck. 3 laps, 16 miles is a decent amount. Definitely longer than some of the crit races. So as you can see, I'll talk through this decision a little bit more, but I am kind of dropping off the back. I quickly looked at the group composition. There was 1 or 2 Cs, but the majority Bs, a few As. Based on how my legs were feeling, again, it's hard to get a good judge just a mile or even less than a mile into a race, but legs were kind of hurting during the warm-ups, a little bit tired, so I wasn't sure exactly how I was feeling in this race, and you never know, it changes throughout the race, but wasn't feeling 100%. I felt like I was pushing it pretty hard to stay with that front group, and it just didn't seem like something that I'd be able to keep up for 15 more miles within this race, or say 25 more kilometers. Yeah, and the other side is it was just majority B riders. I may be able to stick with B riders for 1 lap or maybe even 2 laps. But with this 3-lap race, I kind of shut it down early. I didn't want to put myself in a position where I just gave everything to stay with that front group, get dropped halfway through the race, but then fall back extremely quickly and get passed by other groups behind me who had conserved energy better. So if it were a 1 or 2 lap race, I may have tried to stick on with that group, that front group, and just see how far I can make it. Much more like what I would do at Crit City. At Crit City, generally try to just jump on the front group and hang on as long as possible. But made that quick decision there to drop off from the front group. I was just putting in too much energy to try to stick with them. And in the long term throughout the race, I felt like it'd be a better decision to drop back. As we see here, I'm now catching on that group that was behind, and this is a few B riders, but majorly C riders. So now I'm with more riders of kind of my level. I put a few watts down just to make sure that I catch on to the group, and kind of this is where I'll start thinking about settling in. This is the group that I want to kind of stick with till the end of the race. Again, I don't know at this time if I made the right decision yet, but I feel comfortable with it. Again, it's just one of those kind of split-second decisions you have to make that there's no way to plan ahead of time. You really never know kind of what situation you'll be put in within a race. You can have an overall race strategy coming in, but you always have to have backup plans because you never know exactly how the race will pan out. So I went ahead, skipped forward. 3 laps around Innsbruck means 3 times up the Legsnapper. This is our first time up here. I'll make sure I show them all to you. I know that can be the most fun part of these races to watch, is the more grueling segments, but the Legsnapper is also a point of the race that really strings out the groups. So this is a very flat course aside from this Legsnapper. So what that means is you get a few large groups that really bunch up throughout most of the course. And then you have these large groups that hit that base of the Legsnapper, and then it's all over the place. You get some riders that are sprinting all the way up this. You get some that go all out at the start of the climb and then kind of die at the end. I'm trying to kind of maintain power as best as I can going up it. I kind of get out of the saddle, then I sit back down, then I get back up out of the saddle. Again, this is just the first time up the Legsnapper, so I'm not trying to put in a big dig here or anything, just trying to make sure I stay with the front if possible and continue the power over the top, because then we do go immediately back down the hill. And what that means is it's actually a super tuck opportunity, so continue to put out the watts over the top to get that speed, but now that I have the speed, I sit up, I take the feet off the pedals and let my guy go into a super tuck and try to draft as best as possible and take advantage of the downhill. So I felt good that first time up the Legsnapper. Heart rate got pretty elevated, 185. I wasn't really expecting that, to be honest. I was feeling better than that heart rate showed, if that makes sense. But ultimately, I was happy with my first time up the Legsnapper. It all ended up coming back together for the most part. I think we actually had a large group, so I may be wrong there. I think it actually split into 2 groups. I stayed with the front group, but we kind of consolidated again. And here we are on the second lap, Legsnapper again. This was with, like I said, a little bit of a smaller group. It looks like it's about 6 of us here. So not quite as large as last time, but again, we kind of see the same thing playing out. We have one rider jumped way towards the front, trying to put in an early dig. I'm kind of playing it somewhere in the middle. I definitely don't want to be at the back of the group. Sometimes you'll be able to catch on the way down, going down the hill once you hit a super tuck, but sometimes if you fall out of the draft, that's not possible. As I'm racing with it, it almost looked like Pogača. I think it was spelled a little bit different, but shout out to those who watch the Tour de France. I'm kind of newer to the cycling community, so I've just got into watching more of the pro cycling over the past year. I think this year's tour was the first one that I kind of followed every day, but really enjoyed it. Again, I was pretty happy with how I handled the Legsnapper there. We actually kind of ended up in this decently sized group on the downhill. You don't see that a lot. A lot of times it's very strung out, and then certain riders who are behind have to put in a lot of watts on the downhill. The ones in the front coast. Usually it does end up back together, especially when you have just a few riders on the course. It's not splitting a large group. It's just 5 riders here. There was that one rider in the orange who kind of just took off on the Legsnapper, never to be seen again. Actually, it looks like he's 3 or 4 seconds ahead, so we'll see if we can catch him. But this group does stay together. Again, feeling all right. The heart rate is high. It's at 187 beats per minute. But to be honest, the endurance wasn't an issue in this race. Felt good in terms of how much energy I had in maintaining my heart rate. So I went ahead and jumped forward. This is still the same group that we're with. Again, kind of recapping where we are in the race. So I had dropped back from the original group of Bs and then joined that second group that was on the road that was mostly Cs, a few Bs as well. First time up the Legsnapper, we kind of got split in half, and I joined the front group, and that's pretty much where it stayed for most of the first 2 laps, now into the 3rd lap. And this is where I actually started cramping. I got some calf cramp, so I'll let this play most of the way till the end, but you'll see my power starts to drop. Like here we're in the hundreds, and I become much more surgy. It's not a word, but I ended up surging a lot more during the last lap, just because I was kind of dealing with this like shooting calf cramp pain almost. And what I was doing is I would put in some effort to get to the front of the group, let myself coast, and kind of I was like standing up on the pedals. Here you could see I just completely took off the power and then put it back down. But I was like standing up on the pedals and trying to stretch my calf without losing this group. So all of a sudden my mind kind of went completely away from race strategy and just like, how do I make sure I can get to the finish of this race? I had 1 water bottle with water in it, and then I had another water bottle with some Science and Sport powder in it. So I just started chugging those as well, just trying to get all the energy I could and see if it was a hydration problem. But again, really interesting situation. I hadn't really had this before. I have had like a hamstring cramp on a bike before on an outdoor ride. But that was like immediate cramp. I had to pull over and stretch it out. This was an interesting one because it's like every pedal stroke, it was more of a shooting pain of I could feel a cramp coming, but it never completely cramped up. So I was able to continue riding with this group for the most part. Again, kind of playing around with the watts, like trying to surge to the front, then pull off, stretch it out. So kind of like I said, my mind went away from race strategy to how do I deal with this? How much further can I make it as we're back down to 100 watts? And this just happened on the 3rd lap, but about the first half of that 3rd lap, about until we got to the Legsnapper, I was kind of dealing with this. And as I was chugging water, it kind of started to sort itself out, not to the point that I still felt the pain, but to the point that I felt like I would be able to make it to the finish. And there really isn't a whole lot of race strategy left at this point. This is kind of the group that I'm with. It looks like we have one B rider kind of on their own 12 seconds ahead. We have another group 12 seconds behind us. So I guess with 5 kilometers left, we still are thinking about that group behind us, want to make sure we're putting in the power where we can. And to be honest, we aren't. If any of these riders around me had gone harder, I definitely would have been dropped at this point. I've kind of been sitting around 180, 200 watts and still staying with this group. So it's almost like we're all taking it pretty easy. As we can see, that group behind us is within 9 seconds. So we're playing a dangerous game of there's still enough time left in this race that we can get caught from behind. It's about at this point, as we're getting a little bit closer to the Legsnapper, that I'm starting to feel a little bit better. I think starting to think about not really the end yet, but more having hope that I'll make it to the end. So at this point, I'm just trying to, again, save as much energy as possible. Looking on that right side of the screen to just check on that group behind us, and if they continue getting closer, now they're down to 8 seconds behind us. So jumping back to that strategy decision I made on the first lap, in my opinion, I think I made the right decision. I would not have been able to stay with that front group for 3 laps. Even as I joined that second group on the road, when I first joined them, I was in around like 42nd place out of the 65 on the road. And now in this group, I'm kind of between 28th and 30th, depending on where I sit in this pack of riders. So There were other riders that were dropped from that front group that, because I had dropped earlier, joined another group, and kind of conserved energy, we were actually able to pass and overtake a lot of those riders that had been dropped out of the front group, just because they put all of their energy in on the front, and were completely gassed to the point they couldn't join groups behind them. They were just falling back. So I still do have that energy as we go up the Legsnapper for the third time. And this is critical because once we get up and over the Legsnapper and the downhill after it, the finish comes quickly. So, and we have a small group here, but I definitely want to make sure I stay with this group. This is a point where the race can be decided. And I definitely don't want to kind of fall off the back where I lose the draft of some of these guys around me. And then all of a sudden that group that was only 8 seconds behind us, if I'm stuck on my own as a single rider, they'll be able to catch me quickly. So I am kind of falling off a little bit here. It's tough. I mean, heart rate's at 193. I know the importance of putting in the power over the top of the hill, though. And I think that's what's really critical to this Legsnapper, is there were a few times I even kind of slowed the power down halfway up the hill just to make sure I could make it over the top. So even when I get to the top, I'm still putting in 300, 400 watts now. Again, here, kind of because I had to. I got dropped near the top and wanted to make sure I could recatch this group. But a lot of people get to the top of that climb and kind of just take everything off the pedals. If you can just continue over the top and even on the downhill get 1 or 2 pedal strokes in to build up that speed, you'll hit the super tuck quicker. You'll be going a lot faster down the hill. So I think that's really the critical key of the Legsnapper, is what do you do when you get to the top of the hill, and making sure you keep the power going once you get to the top. So I kind of lagged behind this group going up the Legsnapper, put in a few extra pedal strokes on that downhill, and I'm able to catch them now. And at this point, I'm feeling much better. So the cramping isn't gone. I can kind of still feel it, but I'm confident that I won't completely cramp and not be able to finish this race. I kind of got over it. I don't know if it was the hydration or what it was, but I'm past that point. All of a sudden, 2.4 kilometers, starting to think about the finish. Kilometers definitely go a lot faster than miles, so not much time left. Again, just looking on the right side of the screen, we have one lone rider 10 seconds ahead that has really kind of been ahead of us and maintaining their lead. And then we have this group that's 11, now 12 seconds behind us. So just before the Legsnapper, they had gotten to around 8 seconds. We were going very slowly before getting to that Legsnapper, but then picked up the pace up the hill, down the hill. And now, kind of as we're getting closer to the finish, the pace has definitely increased. Definitely can't stay with this group of riders with just 180, 200 watts anymore. So at this point, with a little over a mile left, and 11 seconds with the group behind us, starting to think that this is really the group that I'm going to finish with. So it's me and 3 other riders. And there are a few other C riders that were in that first group that were able to stick with that group. So I know this isn't the sprint for first. There's, at this time, I'm thinking there's at least 2, maybe 3 C riders ahead. So kind of thinking this may be the sprint for bronze. As one rider just flies by, that was actually a B rider that. It was interesting. I think he was on a time trial bike and would kind of fly by us, and then we'd catch him on the Legsnapper and then fly by us again. Luckily, we let him go, though. He's a B rider, so no need to kind of all-out sprint to try to stay with him. Just coming down to sprint tactics now. We're about a kilometer out. I definitely want to go earlier. In my last few races, I've been working on going earlier, and it's actually worked out for me pretty well. But the legs are hurting today, so I know I may not have all of the watts that I have in some of my better sprints. But because it's a small group, I'm also thinking I don't have to go crazy early. I can be a little bit more waiting to react to somebody else going, unless we get to around 200 meters to go, and then I'll just put down everything that I have left. So yeah, the pace is definitely slowed. We can see I'm down to 100 watts, 200 watts, just seeing kind of where we're at. Again, the group behind us is 14 seconds behind. The group in front of us is 11, 15 seconds ahead. So really is just the four of us coming into half a kilometer to go. I'm exactly where I want to be. I definitely don't want to be on the front. And this group is so tightly packed, I'm completely fine being third or fourth wheel right here. That's the best way to stay in the draft and then kind of slingshot. Don't want to get too far behind in case it is the front rider that makes the first move. I want to make sure that I can react to that. But again, I'm exactly where I want to be. The rider on the Yellowtron seems like he's picking up the pace, but isn't really stepping on it. Now we're at 200 meters and no one else has really made a move. So I just decide to go. It was kind of an interesting sprint because it wasn't much of a sprint. I give it everything I have. I got up a little over 800 watts, and I was able to win from that group. Kind of interesting because we were at 200 meters and still no one had really gone. So luckily I decided to make the decision to go all out. I came away with third, so there were two riders in the front group, but I was able to win the sprint for third. So thanks guys for sticking in there. This was a longer one. Definitely working on these longer races. So thanks for being here. Hope you enjoyed. This is Cadman Cycling, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.